This is Gamer Weekly, bringing you the latest of what the video game scene has to offer. On today's episode of Gamer Weekly, I have David and Edwin of Honor Code, and we're going to be talking about their latest game, Narcosis. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Gamer Weekly. With me today is David and Edwin from Honor Code. Thank you guys so much for coming onto the show.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having us.
Hey, Justin.
So these guys are currently working on a game called Narcosis, and it is by far one of the scarier games I've played in recent memory. If you don't know what Narcosis is, guys, tell us what Narcosis is all about, but not too much about.
So Narcosis is, we describe it as a deep sea survival story. It's a first-person adventure horror game set beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean. The basic premise is that you play as an industrial diver, like basically a miner, and you're out doing your thing one day, and there's some sort of unspecified catastrophe, and you find yourself cut off from your colleagues, and you're running out of oxygen, you're low on light and supplies, and you might slowly be losing your mind. And as far as sort of like the goal of the game is very simple. It's just to find a way to the surface, any way you can.
And trying not to die from horrible crab creatures as well.
Yeah, that's always good advice, but it probably takes on more relevance down there. Yeah.
So, a lot of comparisons I'm sure it's going to get to is like Soma. What would you say is different than that kind of game?
So Soma's a pretty interesting game. I think some of the subject matter, right, when you get down in the nuts and bolts, that's where the two games probably differ the most. Our game really is more about this survival story, centered around the main player character. It's been a while since I played Soma, but Soma gets into like a lot of sort of these things about like consciousness and existential. Yeah, exactly, right. And it's like you've got this guy who is a machine, but he doesn't know he's a machine.
And so, say that.
Oh, is that spoiler?
I never finished Soma.
And so I think we are telling a very different story. I mean, the things that are really similar, maybe, I guess, is that it takes place at the bottom of the ocean. But honestly, like, in my opinion, that, there's just about everything else is pretty different.
Yeah, I think also the thing to notice is that by and large, Soma takes place inside of a building that's at the bottom of the ocean, right? Whereas our game is just to sort of highlight some of the differences is that our game takes place out on the ocean floor, and occasionally you do venture back into man-made habitats, but they've been completely consumed by a zillion gallons of water. So it's not quite the same. I mean, it's similar to it's a lot of people mention BioShock too, which is obviously not the worst thing to have dropped in the same sentence as our game name. But once again, that was about a city that's set beneath the water, not being in the water itself.
Yeah.
And I think one other thing to mention too is that both Soma and BioShock are definitely have pretty heavy-handed dips pretty heavily into sci-fi. They take place in alternate or far-flung timelines from now, and they feature a lot of technology or abilities that aren't sort of from the quote-unquote real world. Whereas with Narcosis, we tried very hard to establish a fiction that is pretty familiar, and even the premise is there's not really any sort of supernatural aspect to the game other than sort of the things that you're experiencing in the player character's head. But there's no like we like to say, there's like no viral outbreaks, there's no good and evil, there's no ancient old gods in our game. It's a much more sort of intimate level of horror.
And so was there like a point where you guys wanted to do something more supernatural? Like to me it seemed it seemed like a lot more of a plausible thing to happen to somebody than like other types of horror games. So what made you guys want to have a more grounded level of horror?
I think having a real world setting, and a lot of it again is this, deep sea survival story is we wanted to sort of portray these events as if they really happened. The game takes place, in the very, very near future. And we did research on the technology and different aspects of underwater habitats and that sort of thing. And I think setting the game in as believable of a setting really helps sort of ground people into the reality of it. And it makes it feel like it's something that could actually happen to you. Which I thought was pretty interesting take on doing a horror style game.
I think one way to sort of expand on what everyone's saying is like the stakes in our game are very low compared to most video games that you might find at your local GameStop. You're not trying to save the world. You're not trying to save your friends and family. You're pretty much just trying to save your own life. And so I think that, like, hopefully that's something that, sort of sets us apart or that people find interesting. And I think you started the question with asking why do we want to, like, I think, we both of us joined the project later. We should mention, like, this started as a student project in France. And so we both sort of tagged along at a later point. But, if I recall, like, I think there were some more sort of like traditional, or they were talking about exploring some more sort of like genre elements, or sort of conspiratorial stuff like that. But I think we felt like there's a certain purity to this experience. It's more like it's one man enduring the environment, enduring the what do you call those things? Enduring Mother Nature, like enduring these extreme circumstances, and like that should hopefully be interesting enough.
And so, something I've noticed too with a lot of horror games, there's different types of like what exactly is scary. So there's like the atmospheric horror, kind of like I guess almost like a Silent Hill kind of feel where like the whole world feels scary. And then there's like the jump scare. And I felt like playing the game, won't go too much into about what I saw. It was cool, but I don't want to talk about too much of it. But how do you find like that balance of like scary where you're like you feel like you're in a very unwelcoming place, but at the same time things are still trying to scare you senseless?
Yeah, totally. I think from the onset, we always wanted to make a game that was more sort of tapping into like your worst fears, psychological horror. And so, if you have like claustrophobia or a fear of the ocean or, dark spaces, or suffocating and these sort of things, like running out of oxygen, right? Like those are a lot of the types of things that we try to tap into, and then also sort of creating the atmosphere for that, whether it's through the lighting, visual props, or the audio design. There are a few jump scares, but we intentionally set out to not rely on them, to not use them heavily throughout the game, because
there's plenty of games that do that very well.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not untapped territory.
Yeah, and so we were mainly trying to focus on some of the psychological horror aspects, which hopefully you saw some of that in your playthrough.
I saw some stuff.
Yeah, I think one thing to add too is that I mean, not to speak on behalf of everyone else, but like I think most game developers who are trying to make something that's scary are probably trying to be aware of the valleys as well as the peaks, right? I think relentless is a nice like sort of buzzword, but I think if you're trying to create a relentlessly horrifying experience, probably you're going to get some pretty serious fatigue, and the impact probably gets lost pretty quickly. So for us, like I think we try to sort of balance these more intense or more sort of outlandish moments with some things where it's, I don't want to quite call it downtime, but where the absence of a direct threat at least gives you makes you more aware of the fact that it's probably going to return.
Right, those moments of relief.
Yeah.
There was a time when I played it where I thought everything was going to go fine, only to be sucked back into the nightmare. And I was like, all right, I didn't expect that. And that's something else too. Like anytime playing that game where I thought I knew what was happening didn't happen and the complete opposite happened, I thought was always something really cool. Like there was always something to look forward to. So you're like, all right, well, what's going to happen now? And you're like, holy shit, this is weird. So, which is good. I think that it's nice that there are games still that are being made that will, keep the mystery going. Like, all right, what am I here for? Like, what is going on? And as weirder things are happening, you're like, okay, seriously, what the fuck is going on? Like, tiny, teensy spoiler. I walked into a room with a couple I thought were dudes, and I turn around, and the door's not there anymore, and then I'm surrounded in dudes, and then they're all gone, and I'm like, what just happened? I thought that was cool, but that's one of the tiniest things that happened in it of, like, so many other things that were going on. So for this game, though, for the horror elements and everything, is it inspired by things that you guys are afraid of yourself, or is it more of inspired by like what you think other people are afraid of?
Well, that's a really good question. I think the team, we've all, like, everyone on the team, we're all like hardcore gamers, and we've been playing video games for a long time. And so, we have a lot of background in playing a variety of games. I think for most everyone on the team, the Silent Hill games is something that we all played a long time ago, and really enjoyed. There's someone on the team who has a film background, and so we pay attention to, like, making sure that the sequences are there's a certain amount of care put into how they evolve. In regard to the horror elements, I don't know. It's hard to say because I'd be speaking on behalf of the designer, and at times we've done a lot of brainstorming as a team to come up with different ideas, right? And so we may start with 100 different ideas coming from everyone's diverse backgrounds, and then you whittle that down, you keep whittling it down, and you sort of take the handful of ideas that sort of ring true the most. And in some cases, right, they are things maybe inspired from a film or an older video game, or sort of trying to do something more original. But yeah, we try to blend, a mix of things that are just like terrifying or maybe like gruesome with things that are more just surreal and strange, to make sure that there's like a variety of those moments in the game.
Yeah, I think it's also like worth to know, like, like Edwin says, we're all longtime, fans of video games and the art of making video games and stuff. But like, it's not like once again, we joined the project a little later, but I think that everyone on the team would agree that it's not like they set out to make the ultimate horror game. That wasn't like the first and foremost goal. I think all of us are trying to make something meaningful and, like, more importantly, something unique, right? So it's not like we went out and, like, spent a couple months playing every horror game and made a checklist of, like, all the coolest stuff, and then tried to sort of like Frankenstein that together, to make like the uber horror game, because that's probably like a fundamentally flawed creative approach, but it's also if you're going to commit so much time and effort and you're going to do the quote unquote indie thing, probably, hopefully, I think you'd want to be motivated by the desire to do something original and different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's one of the few games too where it's tapped into one of my deepest, darkest horrors, which is dead fish. So I hope that's not too much of a spoiler. There are fish in the game. It's underwater. I mean, like, if you're not expecting fish, I don't know what you're doing. But this sounds crazy, but when I was 7 years old, I was scarred for life by a dead fish. So I've had I know it sounds ridiculous, but I've had constant nightmares about dead fish for a really long time, actually. And then I played this game, and it just I'll probably start crying playing the game, which
might be
is
therapeutic.
Right. Or it's like you're kind of like conquering your fears. Like, I beat the dead fish game. I'm over the dead fish, or at least the virtual ones.
Well, you're not the only one who shares in that fear. We've done some play testing and have had other people who really, really dislike fish as well, in particular dead fish. So
We can start a group.
yeah, there's others out there that share that with you.
There are literally dozens of us. So the game is coming out in a couple weeks.
Yeah, less than a couple weeks.
How do you get?
More like a week and a couple days.
How do you guys feel?
I mean, I think everyone on the team is excited, to see the game come out on March 28th. For the French team, this again, is a student project that they started almost 5 years ago or something like that. And so it's been a long time coming. I've been working tirelessly for the last year and a half or something like that. And it's I think it's going to be really. I don't think it's really hit anyone yet, right? Like when the game's actually out, I think we'll be able to enjoy it a little more. But anytime you're working on something that's a labor of love, it's always extremely rewarding to have your sort of creative passions see the light of day, and hopefully people will enjoy it. I think that's something we'll probably take the most gratification in is seeing other players enjoy the experience that we've crafted for them.
And then you get to experience the real horror, which is waiting for the Steam reviews.
Yeah, we're eagerly anticipating that. And we've still got a week and a few days where we're still trying to fix a couple last bugs and just make sure everything is swimming along perfectly.
I get it. Thanks for the pun. So I honestly am blown away by the game so far. I think it's been a pretty awesome experience, and I cannot wait for other people to check out the game as well. You guys have done a fantastic job. Also, the game runs very smoothly. To me, it seemed like you guys put a lot of care into the game, which I feel like a lot of people nowadays kind of expect a game to just be like broken in a way, like a lot of how like AAA games are. And it seems like indie games now are the ones that are showing like, hey, we can make a finished game and it runs properly. So I never experienced a single frame drop, and I was always invested so far into the game. So far, you guys have made a pretty awesome game. So I think everyone should check out Narcosis when the game comes out.
Well, that's extremely good, especially from me coming from the QA perspective, to hear that you had a very positive gameplay experience. We've been spending a lot of time in the last month and a half polishing everything and optimizing and so on and so forth. So it's good to hear it's paying off.
I always feel terrified giving my own opinion on my own show about things because I try to not make it about myself at any point. So I'm like, oh God, I hope people are okay with me saying an opinion about something real quick. But I think everyone's going to be okay that it was a positive opinion about a game that I thought was cool. So the game's only coming out on PC, right?
So it'll debut on Steam and the Oculus Store. We'll be supporting PC and Mac, the Oculus Rift and the Vive VR headsets, and then we'll also be coming to Xbox One.
Sweet. Are we maybe doing maybe we get the Switch and PS4?
The Switch, I don't know. That's definitely to be determined. We've had a lot of talks internally about bringing the game to PSVR, which I think is something we want to do. We got to get this game shipped first, and then maybe take a few days off and see what the future holds for us. But it's definitely something that we've talked about internally. So.
And the game comes out on March 28th. Is that right?
March 28th. That's correct.
Fantastic. So if you guys are extremely ready for a terrifying game, if you are a fan of games like BioShock and Soma and anything that has a very atmospheric, scary thing to it, I highly recommend checking out Narcosis. It is pretty awesome, and you will not regret it. Thank you guys, David, Edwin, thank you guys so much for coming onto the show. And check out Narcosis on March 28th on Steam. Add it to your wish list. Buy the game. And buy copies for your friends if they are broke, because that's what good people do. They buy games for other people. So thank you guys so much for listening to the show. If you enjoy the show, I don't want to say... I always say it in every episode now. Like, don't... Click the like button if you would like to. That would be cool. Also, there's a YouTube channel, but I can't change the link yet until I have 100 subscribers. So... subscribe, please, so that I can change the link instead of a bunch of numbers and letters, because that's hard to find. Yeah, also listen to all the other episodes too, because all the other developers are awesome as well. And I'm going to stop rambling, and this is the end of the episode. Thank you guys so much for listening, and goodbye.